Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for us to welcome you to the second webinar organized by European Guanxi. Please turn off your cameras and microphones. I am Antonio and I will be today's moderator. Our guest speaker, Martin Šebeňa, is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Hong Kong. He holds a master's degree in political science and sinology from the Charles University in Prague and an MPhil degree in finance from the Curtin University in Perth, Australia. He has completed 1 year-long study at the Zhejiang University in Hangzhou, in China, after receiving Chinese government scholarship, and also in Pisa, in Italy, as an Erasmus exchange student. He has worked in financial services in Czechia, Australia, Hong Kong, and Switzerland. He is also a researcher at the Central European Institute of Asian Studies. Today, he is going to talk about decentralization and the challenges to Chinese foreign policy making. We hope that you enjoyed this topic and also join the discussion at the end. So, Martin, if you want to start.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, European Guanxi, for organizing, and thank you, everyone, for taking the time and joining the meeting. I'll just quickly present my slides that I've prepared for you. So the topic today is decentralization and challenges to Chinese policy making. As you can see, my name is actually written with some funny signs. Antonio didn't mention that I'm originally from Slovakia. So this is my name, and I'm a PhD candidate in European studies, funny enough. But my research is comparative. I compare Chinese approaches and approaches of or foreign policy of certain European countries, and also studying European studies in China or in Hong Kong, however you define it. It's a great opportunity to combine the two. So to my topic, this is a quick structure overview. I'll be talking about decentralization as is advertised by the title of today's topic, but I will try to make a little more out of it. So I will, in a second part of it, I'll go to state transformation processes that have taken part in China. And I'll just go through a few current examples. And then, as Antonio has already mentioned, we'll do a Q&A session. And perhaps one thing that I want to mention with regards to the European studies background is that one of the things that I want to achieve is I'd like to we've studied European Union in a lot of detail and nuance in the past 70 years. And I sometimes feel that our analysis of China does not have the same amount of nuance that we use when we analyze Europe. So I'm attempting to use some of the theories and approaches developed in European studies and see how we can apply them on a Chinese context. Of course, there's huge difference between a European Union and China, obviously, but I'll be looking at specific spheres and areas where we can actually apply these, and perhaps we find more similarities than we would think. So, as I mentioned, a very quick overview at the beginning, because I want you to keep a few things in mind throughout the presentation. So I start with them right away at the beginning. So the first is the size of China. Obviously, we all know China is huge. There's one thing that's related to it. We think of China as economy of scale when we use the macroeconomic theory, and we always say, oh, China is a huge market, we have to go into market. And when we look at it from this perspective, certainly it may make sense. China is a huge market, but China is so big and so difficult to manage centrally, but not only from political perspective, but also from economic perspective, that we're actually experiencing something that's called these economies of scale, right? It breaks down to a number of clusters. So we cannot speak of the Chinese economy does not behave in the same way, and political systems way as well in all parts of China. Now, the second thing, and it's obvious for everyone who studied communist regime, I was born in a communist country myself, there's a duplicate hierarchy. There's a state hierarchy and there's a communist party hierarchy. And party one, so the party is in charge of political affairs such as cabinet appointments, propaganda, and I'm here talking on let's say lower levels because concerned with decentralization. So as power goes down from center, who is responsible for what? And the state is responsible for, so state institutions or bureaucrats are responsible for economic management, public services, and regulation, right? So you always have to keep in mind that there are the two structures, and then someone else is responsible for, people are responsible for different things. Number three, variability. And as I said, I make it very, very complicated by saying deliberate non-enforcement of compliance. But basically, there is this Chinese saying, tailor your methods to local conditions. And that means that different officials in different cities, different provinces, different localities can use different means to progress, right? To develop their economy, their political, their systems, etc. So central government does not tell anyone to do this or that. They give a broad set of directives, but the way a local bureaucrat decides to implement them is really up to him. And sometimes they can even ignore. And we'll talk about later. Ignore what the central government is telling them. And number four is vagueness. So in European countries, we are used to the government issuing really well-defined rules. Like when there's a policy, it's written in no unclear terms. But in China, it's different. There's certain central level reforms or policies that are more like templates for alternatives. I'm like, you can do this from here, starting from here to here, right? Anything in between, you guys, you're good to implement. if I make it very, very simple. So it's very different between how China is run and how say our countries are run. Now, so there are a few terms or a few ways to describe how the Chinese political system works. So we're talking about domestic. Let's just let me reiterate: domestic, decentralized, and I'll later come to analyze or extend it to foreign policy. But to understand foreign policy, in my view, I'm not an international relations scholar, as in from that perspective of international relations theories. I go from domestic politics. We need to understand how China is run so that we can understand what the Chinese are doing abroad, right? And how does it interfere with, how does it influence foreign policy? So number one thing here is adaptation, right? And that's already that was already explicitly stated by Deng Xiaoping back in the 80s, when he just uttered this very famous quote of his, cross the river by filling the stones, right? So everyone can really has to adapt and can use very, very different methods. And this is actually in a way a subtle rebuttal of Mao Zedong, right? Before 1978, there was a very strict centralized system. They would tell everyone how to do things, how to go about resolving issues or setting a policy, and etc. Here you have very different things. You have a trial and error. You have something that we can call muddling through. So no big strategy, no directive, but really just engage with the problems or issue as they appear as you need to. And another thing is post hoc acceptance of policies. So what I mean by this is that oftentimes the central government only formalizes events that are already existing. So for instance, a very good example is as at the beginning, the foreign direct investments, the FDI, were coming to the coastal regions of China, and they're building up factories there, etc. But as over time, as Chinese economy was growing, the coastal regions have become more expensive, and some industries such as textiles or heavy industry, that they're moving more and more inland in China to new provinces that have not been part of the initial reform and opening. So and this was happening without the government encouraging it. It was just economic forces in motion, and then the government later on tried to come and formalize this and say, okay, now we need to develop more the central regions, the western regions, etc. But they were already, putting labels of things that already existed. They were not coming. Oh, right, now today we're going to start developing Sichuan province. It was already on the way. They just gave it a framework. And a very recent example is actually. This past Wednesday, Xi Jinping was in Shenzhen, and he was talking about how Shenzhen will be, the city that's ahead and will be developing in a different way. Well, this has been going on in Shenzhen for quite a while now. Shenzhen is light years ahead of other cities in a number of industries and a number of developments like smart city, etc. So Xi Jinping is actually just describing what's already going on. It is important. He gives it a strategy. He gives the central government blessing. Perhaps some funding will come into it. Other cities are encouraged to copy from Shenzhen what went well, etc. But it is post hoc. Something's happening, and we put a label on it. And the system that has been developed through this push for decentralization, or what Deng Xiaoping and his followers were achieving, is something that's been labeled by kind of liberal as fragmented authoritarianism. But there are many other labels, and I just listed them. I listed them on the screen. I'll not go through them, but they, by and large, mean the same, that these decentralization, this ability to adapt to certain circumstances, have actually strengthened the Chinese regime. Especially Libertal was talking about the post-1989 China, that actually the system emerged from the disruptions quite strong, because it was that they were able to deal with the issues. If it was a centralized, ossified system that is very slow and late to addressing issues, it would not have been so strong. But because of this adaptation feature that is deeply embedded in Chinese governments, and especially on lower levels, the system is quite strong. There is another term, authoritarian resilience. That's what I'm describing. Now, but to achieve adaptation, to achieve experimentation and invention, which are actually the things that do drive the Chinese economy, we need to incentivize the bureaucrats on different levels. And how do we do that? Well, the high-level bureaucrats, there is a system of promotions within the Chinese system, right? And studies have shown that promotion correlates with economic performance. So what does that mean? What that means is that they really look at how the bureaucrats are doing, how well are they developing their localities, and they promote them based on that. With lower level bureaucrats, they cannot never dream of getting promoted, but there are some systems of benefits and allowances from the state that they receive, and there is also corruption, which often, let's say, prior to Xi Jinping taking office, was overlooked, or maybe they closed one eye. It's okay because you're performing, etc. You have to get, in a way, remunerated. Xi Jinping started the campaign, doesn't mean the corruption is not there anymore. recommend a book by Yun Ang. I find it a brilliant book. She's actually describing the whole system, how it emerged, and also actually using the China model or Chinese way to develop new theories within developmental economies, which are very interesting. I'm not going to them, but she calls the Chinese system the directed improvisation. So instead of having a totalitarian ruler who tells you how to do things, you have a director who sets objectives, sets the red lines. Okay, within from here to here, you can operate freely, but do not cross these. And then local level bureaucrats get a lot of discretion. They can really, as long as they do not cross the red lines, they can implement policies they deem suitable for their localities, and they do not have to ask the central government for permission, because it's within that. The government is just acting as a director, right? And they often look at what people in other districts or other provinces are doing, and if they see something that's working very well, they adopt it. If they're doing something that's not really performing, they probably scrap it and do something else. What that also means that we have a high level of uneven development within China. And uneven, I'm not talking now about inequalities, but talking about proceeding from stage to stage, right? There's a lot of discussion about what is China model, etc. But there is, I do not think there is one China model, because what China has done is, or what we can see is that it's experimented and moved in different phases of development, economic development, political development as well, in a way. It experimented with different types of economic models, right? So we know when Deng Xiaoping opened the Chinese economy and liberalized the Chinese economy, we had this communal entrepreneurships, right? And the villagers created communes, and they owned, produced, and things that they were trading with each other and kept the benefits of it. Right? Now, this has developed, and the Chinese economy outgrown this model, and for a period of time in 1990s, we really had freewheeling capitalism. FDIs flowing in, building factories, the kind of Washington consensus style, if you wish. But then in 2000s, as things started getting a little bit out of hand, or when this was when people had to reckon with environmental degradation and other things, then the government stepped in a little bit more and started more regulating. But what is important is that in certain provinces of China, we have different styles. So maybe somewhere in a more inland province, we still have more capitalist model, because that's still necessary for them to develop. But in say coastal province, we are further ahead, because are richer and demand other things and than people in poor regions. So what are the heterogeneities in China? Well, they're defined by geography. They're defined by which makes sense, right? So you have Shenzhen, which is close to Hong Kong. Obviously, it's gonna develop faster than a place in north of China that's bordering on Mongolia. You have fertile land, you have highlands, etc. So geography does define it. We have endowment, which means legacies, socialist legacies, because some places were run better in the past than others, and they've created institutions that are persisting until now and well performing, while others perhaps were much more backward, etc. And then the level of economic development in the late 1970s, and that's something that I just described about uneven development. So China is decentralized. It's also decentralized, as in is very heterogeneous in many areas. And while I mentioned that decentralization was important in driving Chinese economy and this Chinese miracle, it also brings a lot of problems and challenges, and these problems, keep in mind, will also be later transferred into foreign policy, and that's something that I want to focus on today. So one thing is factionalism, right? So I'm here in this province, or localism. You're in different province. We do things our way, you do things your way. They fight against each other. Factionalism is within the party, and localism is within states, so within provinces or districts. Departmentalism, because there are many agencies in China, there are many ministries that try to how to put it. So people working for a certain ministry are trying to defend their ministry's position and do a better job than other ministries. That there is a competition between different levels of government, and there's this vagueness that I mentioned in how policies define and communicated on from central level to local level, and this brings us to the fact there is a high degree of unpredictability of outcomes. We don't know what will happen, because we know that these bureaucrats, they have discretion. They can do whatever they want, but they can do a lot of different things. We do not know. I mean, there is a control, there is everything, but it's very difficult to keep everything in check. And obviously there are side effects. There's corruption, as I already mentioned, environmental degradation. There is social inequality, because the system is geared toward economic performance, and the side effects of fast economic performance are these. Now, I'm moving to the second part, and perhaps a little more theoretical, but we have a few. There are three processes within state transformation that are very important in influencing foreign policy. The first one is disaggregation, and there is a nice quote that I took from this paper from Hameiri and Jones. Dispersion of policy making among a wide number of agencies. So the state doesn't control everything, doesn't do the planning, doesn't do the budgeting, but there are a lot of different agencies, be it ministries, be it provincial governments, be it regulators, etc., that are in charge of different aspects of policy making, of economy, of daily life, and often they have overlapping responsibilities and jurisdictions. What that means is they fight among each other, right? Fight who is responsible for that, who has more power. So you have a number of entities just endlessly fighting for more power. Power is dispersed both vertically and horizontally. So it's not only decentralization, as I mentioned, as we talk about, but it's also vertical disaggregation, right? So there are many more ministries. So apart from ministries, but a lot of CEOs of state companies in China have ministerial level position, right? So it can happen that a ministry would like to tell SOE, please do this or that, but SOE is actually very powerful. It might be maybe one of the big mining companies or electricity companies or whatnot. Say, no, we're not going to do it. You do not have jurisdiction over us. I am a minister level position. You are a minister level position. We're not going to do it. And that creates issues. There's been a lot of privatization in China, especially in the 1990s during Zhurongti, and SOEs, as I mentioned, have often autonomous management and powerful management, so that ministries cannot really tell them how to carry out economic policy oftentimes. And what we also witness is that there are a lot of non-state actors within public governments, right? So mostly private firm, often private firms. NGOs are not really a thing in China. Academia might be, etc. The second thing is decentralization, which I already mentioned and discussed at length. The one thing that I want to mention here is that some scholars call China a federal state, actually, de facto, of course. not on paper, not in, but in actual structure. When you look at it, when you look how the provinces and lower level governments are acting, you really see that they are not acting as if they were in a unitary state. It really resembles federalism. And the third one is internationalization. So we live in era of interconnectedness and globalization, and it means that not only central government is engaging in central policy, but there's a huge number of actors actually engaging in foreign policy. It can be municipal governments, can be provincial governments, can be SOEs, it can be many different actors. An example here is, because I'm from Slovakia, I lived in Prague, so Czechia for a while. There's been a spat between sister cities, right? Prague and Shanghai, Prague and Beijing. And it's also the things because which may not have actually created a lot of goodwill within the Czech population, because the Beijing and Shanghai municipal governments were very strictly criticizing the government of Prague, etc. So these cities are also entering the international arena. They are part of the foreign policy making, for foreign politics. So really there is a huge number of actors, and also there is a problem. The problem is that it's really hard to keep everyone in check to control how different actors are engaging, what they're doing. So another quote from Hameiri and Jones, and I think I found it pretty good, so I like to read it out. And how the coincidence of fragmentation and or decentralization with internalization, so all these three processes that I mentioned, may produce uncoordinated and incoherent, often contradictory foreign security policies, right? And this is what I want to get at, because what drives my research in this area is the fact that we often look at China as a unitary actor in foreign policy, look at strategies, and often assume that each actor that comes out of China is perfectly in line with Chinese government, central government foreign policy. And what I want to define today and convince you of today is that this is not the case. Often SOEs, provincial governments, municipal governments, private firms are acting contrary to what the state wants them to do when engaging abroad. Here is one interesting definition: the regulatory state with Chinese characteristics, right? So instead of having planning, production, distribution centrally managed as a centrally planned economy we had before 1978, we have established new regulators, agencies, and instead of a positive intervention telling people what to do, we have negative intervention telling them what not to do. And I'm speaking very high level. There is much more nuance to it. The regulatory state, this definition comes from European studies, and applying it on Chinese context, it's also very interesting. Obviously, there is a difference. As I said, I have to qualify. China is not Europe. China has two major differences. First one is that the state still has authoritarian modes of intervention. I mentioned exchange rate and taxes, but disciplining is really important. State can come in and change things, right? It doesn't happen often, or as often as we would think, because there's also cost connected to it, right? So Xi Jinping cannot just get involved into every issue, every fight, and his fight, as we say. But there is this option, right? Which European governments do not have often. This option to just come in and change local level officials, especially because they're often elected, right, in democratic elections. The second thing is that China has incoherent regulatory mechanisms, and that's because of what I already mentioned, that they do not give out strict, well-defined commands, but because it's all vague and ambiguous. And then also when we look at how policy is implemented in China, I mentioned the outcome of the shortage of formal definition is that the decision making is highly personalized and also depends on how much power you have. And how do you get power? Well, you build your Guanxi network, right? You can build a European Guanxi network. It's the one we are here joining here, but usually local level officials and everyone is just creating these networks within the government structure. The other thing is, and that's often not well understood, is that China actually has consensual decision making. That when there is an issue, when there is an tension, a problem that needs to be solved, the central government often doesn't come and say, "Oh, this is how you solve it," but they want involved entities to discuss between themselves. So you can have a government in one city, government in another city, maybe a ministry, etc. And what the government wants, that through bargaining, maybe through competition, etc., they come with a solution that they agree on, and then the government just gives a stamp of approval on it. But that's obviously problematic because it can lead to delays. Can lead to incoherence. It can be because for this issue we use this solution, for another issue we have a different solution. So it is important to keep that in mind, that this is required on not only on lower level, the ministerial level, it's pretty high level, but still the agencies, the ministries have to talk it out between themselves. And I guess the last theoretical thing that I want to mention is that there are 3 I's. So how Chinese entities, private, state, semi-private, etc., are engaging with the central government in foreign policy making. It can be defined by the 3 I's. So by influencing, so they can try use formal and informal means to shape national government policy agency. So for instance, they can lobby, right? And I put here in brackets South China Sea. So as you may know, officially and within China's government system, all of China's South China Sea is under the administration of the Hainan provincial government. The Hainan provincial government has its own priorities. So for instance, they want the Hainanese fishing vessels to be able to freely do fishing in all of South China Sea, which may not be coherent with the central government strategy, because what this leads to is that they often clash with Vietnamese boats, with the Filipino boats, with the Malaysian boats. But the Hainan provincial government lobbies with the central government, and the central government says, okay, we should push for this. We should push for free fishing within all of South China Sea. So that this is influence. This is how can they influence? There are many other ways, many other examples, and we may go through them a bit later. There's also interpreting, and that is very important. There's also, as I said, state directives, very broad, not detailed policy, and Belt and Road Initiative is a very good example of that. And in the second reading I assigned, or I wanted to point out today is also talking about Belt and Road Initiative and how incoherently it is it is applied. Right as at the beginning. So think of it this way: there is no officially sanctioned map of Belt and Road Initiative. What we use is actually not the official one. And think of how it evolved. And now we're talking about the health, Silk Road, Latin America is part of it. The Arctic is part of it. It wasn't there before. And then different actors from universities, starting from universities who organize Belt and Road conferences, to private companies or SOEs who go to do business in Africa and say, oh, this is part of Belt and Road initiative. Or, funny enough, how many of the Belt and Road projects were actually started before Belt and Road was even announced, right? So, but they were later made part of it. So there's a lot of interpretation going on. And then ignoring. You would think this is not happening in China. It's actually happening a lot. And then an entity can decide to actually ignore the central government directive, policy. So, and this is linked then to the ability of state to discipline. Now, often the government doesn't mind because, see, by ignoring that, you achieved actually a good outcome, which is fine. But if you really go against central government and to the degree that it angers central government, then you'll be disciplined. An example here, and it's domestic policy, but it can happen in foreign policy. And I can mention that later. But in domestic policy, I think it was in June this year when Xi Jinping went to the Shanxi province and shook up the government, fired a lot of people from the provincial government. What was happening is that there is a national park, and the local officials were building, so doing some real estate development in the national park. Central government didn't like it because a lot of local residents didn't like it, etc. And I think this has been going on for a few years. And Xi Jinping was personally sending them warnings and letters that they should not go ahead, but that they still did. They were ignoring him. And they had ability for a number of years. As I said, Xi Jinping carefully chooses his fights, and it came up to this year when he decided, okay, this was enough. I have to change this. But there is a lot of ignoring going on. Another example, perhaps closer to my home, in Czechia, there was this firm that engaged the Czech president and started working on improving the ties with China. But this firm also had a lot of controversial activities, especially in Africa, where there was a lot of corruption within the mining sector, etc. And eventually, the CEO of this company was disappeared in China, to the big embarrassment of the Czech president and to big questions of the Czech public. But he was thrown into prison without any announcement and anything. We still have very little information what has happened. But the thing is, he has been ignoring the CEO of this company, the directives of the Chinese state. He went to Africa. He bought mines and whatnot. There's a lot of corruption, etc. And eventually, the state or the party caught up with him. So now I have three very quick examples of how we can interpret some events using the framework that I just presented. The first one is the face mask backlash, and I'm sure everyone here today knows about it. When coronavirus reached Europe, Europeans were desperate to buy face masks from China, but many of them came in a very bad quality. Now, my problem with this is that we're saying, oh, China is sending us low quality face masks. Well, you think again of China as a unitary actor. I think of China as a sum of a huge number of actors, and then there were obviously a lot of factors that were producing crap product. But the problem is here, for, as I mentioned, regulatory state. The central government doesn't have the control. You should not really blame the central government for that. It was the enforcement of local level regulators, right? So if you, let's say in Guangdong province, there should be the regulator, there should be the Guangdong province that checks the quality of these producers and sanctions them, penalizes them if it's not good. So as I said, it's decentralized, it's dispersed, and it's with really local level government. There's a lot of collusion. The rich factory owners know the people from the agency, etc., and they kind of allow them to export those bad quality face masks. The second thing also, and this is interesting in Chinese context, and this is one way of how of innovative ways of that help China get rich is the licensing. So what if you are producing something for export, you do not have to have a domestic license in China. So for instance, imagine you're producing drug pills or something, right? Medicine, and if you're not using them for selling them in the Chinese market, you don't need the Chinese certificate for it. You only need the certification from the state of where you're going to export your goods, right? So if you're exporting these pills to Germany, these need to be compliant with the German regulations. But as long as you're not selling them domestically, you don't need the Chinese license. And this also often happen in this situation that these exporters actually did not have Chinese license. They were supposed to have the license in Germany or in America or in Spain or wherever they were selling to, which they may often have counterfeiting, but they did not need a Chinese license. So they were actually not under the control of China's regulators as well. That's uniquely Chinese. If you're in Europe, if you're in Italy, and even if you're exporting only, but you still need Italian license. It doesn't happen this way in China. So, it took a while until the central government authorities reined in and started controlling that. And also, market actually took care of it because as new companies were trying to get on the market and make a lot of money producing face masks, they started producing better quality, etc. So the bad apples were actually thrown out of the basket. But just this example shows us really it's not, you shouldn't really blame the central Chinese government for sending faulty goods for all of it. Definitely, they may have been something, I don't know, but definitely not all of it. And the explanation really goes into the regulatory states and then the centralization that I discussed earlier. The second thing is with pork exports or imports actually, and this is one item that also I personally experienced because it wasn't mentioned here, but I did an internship at a Chinese embassy. So Slovakia embassy in China, sorry, not Chinese embassy. And I was actually working partially on meat certification, etc. So I have a bit of a personal professional insights into this. And what happened early September is that China has banned imports of pork from Germany. As you probably know, China has a big shortage of pork because of the swine disease last year that decimated half the Chinese hog population. And China is really reliant on importing a lot of pork from abroad. Pork is a very important item, in China, and the prices were going up because there's shortage. It's taken the whole inflation up. So it's a really big political issue in China. Now, what has happened is that a dead pig was found in Germany, and it immediately triggered a ban on imports, which is actually how the policy is defined. It actually happened to Slovakia as well. We were in part of certification when a dead pig was discovered in Slovakia, dead because of swine flu, obviously. And China immediately stopped the process and said, we're not importing from Slovakia anymore. They did the very same thing to Germany. But as you can see in this Financial Times article, the subtitle says, analysts say movies more about politics than genuine concern. It is possible, but I want to offer an alternative explanation. and that says, look at this disaggregation of power and then the infighting between institutions for power that I mentioned before. Because diseases are within Ministry of Agriculture, but customs does the certifications. So one has to say it's okay, and the other one, so there are no dead pigs, and the other one gives you the license to import. And these two, it takes forever. For smaller countries like Slovakia, but it's not in Slovakia, it's Finland and other smaller countries, it takes years to get these things done. Because our central government doesn't care, it's with these two, and these two, they don't really care for small countries, they fight among each other. And also there is this slow policy making. The preference of the central government is that they find a solution between the two, and present it to the central government. The other thing is that there was bad risk management on the Chinese side, because Germany, I think, is number 7 meat exporter to China, 7th largest meat exporter in China. So without German meat, China really has a shortage again of pork, prices go up, etc. So actually Chinese are hurting themselves by banning imports from Germany. And they have long been calls, look, don't make it state level, make it provincial level. If this there is swine flu in one of the states of Germany, this was in Pomerania, if I'm not mistaken, there is no need to ban imports from Bavaria, where this is not present, where all the pigs are healthy. Right, but because the policy making was so slow on Chinese side, they had to ban all of Germany, and they had to stop imports from all producers within Germany, even though perhaps it's illogical, and it would have made more sense for both China and Germany and everyone to make it more region specific. But because things move very slowly, this was perhaps not a priority, but something that the central government was not involved in. This did not happen, and now they're in a difficult position, and the difficult position was created by exactly this disaggregation of power, slow policy making, the things that I talked about. Third example doesn't really concern Europe, but I find it interesting because I know people who were involved in this, and I think this was in April when Africans were started being thrown out of their apartments in China. And again, they were called out, China's racist, China's doing this and that. And what actually happened is that it's all started with one very zealous and overly eager local level bureaucrat who has somehow approved one African, I think, a businessman was thrown out of their apartment, and they kind of got a stamp of approval for that it's okay. And then the others thought, oh, it's fine to do it, we'll do it as well. And then because it, of course, it coincided with the fact that in April, the coronavirus situation was largely under control in China, and new cases were mostly imported. And what happened is that a lot of African businessmen were traveling to China because they wanted to purchase face masks, they want to purchase PPE, they want to purchase medicine from the Chinese and send it back to their countries to fight the coronavirus in their countries. And the Chinese were worried that they will bring coronavirus to their country. And obviously, I'm not going to deny there's high level of racism involved in that as well. But it all started with a local level bureaucrat who just decided it's okay to throw out this person out of their apartment because you're scared they have coronavirus, they bring coronavirus. And then the central government actually had to talk to the representatives of different African countries, deal with the situation. It's very, very difficult for them, not easy. It was sorted out eventually, but there were these famous scenes where the Chinese ambassador to Nigeria was grilled by the Nigerian government, etc. So it's all because of decentralization. This person, while doing locally, it has not global but perhaps international ramification. And with that, I would like to thank you for for listening to me. This brings my presentation to close, and I'll give the mic to Antonia, who will be taking your questions, I hope.
So thank you, Martin, for your terrific presentation. And now we will have a part of discussion. So I would like to ask you a question before we move on to the questions from the audience. And the question is that after Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, there have been increasing efforts to re-centralize power in China. Still, in some issues, such as in foreign policy, that re-centralization is far from being complete. So what's the reason of this? Is it because the central leadership has decided that it's good to leave some room for maneuver for foreign policy actors, or just because there are some structural constraints that even the central leadership in Beijing cannot overcome?
Yeah, I think it's more the second. One thing is that it's structural. The other thing is also that decentralization has been a driver of Chinese economic progress. So there is a trade-off. The more you centralize, the more you constrain Chinese economic growth. And the third one is, I think, are the factions. There is a lot of resistance, and it's not only, let's say, from the party. You know, there are cliques and groups within the party that are probably anti-Xi Jinping. We know a lot of those people, but also from let's say ordinary people, because some people are better off, some people are not, and if you change these things, if you take us the ability to decide or to have a say in this, they will protest, and the government is not willing to fight this opposition. So there are multiple reasons, but the structural ones are the most prevalent.
We have several questions from the audience, and in the first place we have a question from Blanca Maravini, and the question is, to what point the constitutional amendments in 2018 have affected this system with the bureaucrats, especially with the new supervision organs that seem to be part of the anti-corruption campaign?
Right, and this is all part of the re-centralization. So over time, so from 1978 until today, the decentralization has progressed at a different pace, at different stages. It was introduced gradually, and at some point it was rolled back, and we are in a phase of rolling it back again. So the 2018 amendments that are part of it. But I like the quote of David Chambo, a political scientist with focus in China. He said, look, there is a tension in the system, right? So someone to decentralize more, someone to centralize more, and we are probably at a phase where the centralization drive is stronger under Xi Jinping, but I do not think that this will fundamentally change the structure of Chinese government. Certainly, some powers will come back to the center, but by and large, a lot of these things that I described will remain. That agencies still have a lot of power.
Okay, and we have another question about wolf warrior diplomacy. So what's your view on wolf warrior diplomacy that emerged in China recently? Can it be explained by the framework just presented?
Not all of it, but some of it, and I would point out a specific personality. That's Zhao Liqian. Many of you may have encountered him on Twitter, because he's very big on Twitter. He's currently the speaker of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, but he started off, really, his career took off. He was the second or third diplomat at a Chinese embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan, and he took to Twitter and was very, very aggressive towards the West, if I can use this expression, and gain a lot of followership, and this seemed and he got promoted for that, right? He got promoted for the right to the position of the speaker of the foreign ministry. So we first see how the policies that are seen as successful in one place are adopted elsewhere, and second, we also see how the promotions are working in China. Right? This is seen as a successful example. We will promote, and then now we see almost all Chinese embassies have opened Twitter accounts and are spreading the China message on social media.
And we also have a question about the behavior of state-owned enterprises abroad. Are they independent, or do they follow government objectives?
There's a lot of research on that, and they're mixed results. But I would say they often do follow, perhaps more often than not, they do follow the government objective. The thing is that there are many of those that do not follow, that engage in corruption, that engage in environmental degradation, that actually pursue actions that are detrimental to the Chinese either image or Chinese foreign policy, and so often they're often driven by just by profit. And if they're driven by profit, they do not care about the environment or anything. They go and buy mines somewhere and just try to get money out of it. Often driven by different incentives that are not aligned with the Chinese state-sanctioned foreign policy. So they actually sometimes undermine the position of or the Chinese state in individual countries.
Okay, and we have two questions from Connor Nolan. The first one is, would you say that for initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative, they benefit from the fragmented approach and lack of concrete policy insofar as it allows for pragmatism and flexibility? And the second one is, do you think that the lack of coherence is negative with regards to negotiations with the European Union, that if it was rectified by a coherent approach, that it would actually help in negotiations on the investment agreement?
Yeah, so the first question was whether the fragmented approach helps the Belt and Road Initiative, and I think yes. I think this is how China got rich internally, and they're using this approach of, well, let people venture out and see what's good for them. People, I mean companies, and see what's good for them. Let's try this, try that. Here we have different approach. In this country we have different approach, and by trying out different things, we will see what's working, and perhaps adopting that policy going forward. So yes, in many aspects it does help. It does help. Then it can create this backlash, which was something that I tried to focus on today. But yes, it does help, obviously, and it is also why they have done it. And with the negotiations with EU, I think they're a little more coherent when it comes on this high level communication, right, between the Chinese and between the EU, right. I was mostly focused on the lower level entities today. So when we discuss high level diplomatic agreements, I think they're more in line and than not.
You mentioned that due to the internationalization, lower level government entities are also engaging abroad. Can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah. So, excuse me. As I mentioned, the sister cities agreements and the backlash that it created is an example of that. Another of my favorite examples is the trains from China to Europe that go over land, obviously, and so there was an interesting interview in Slovak newspaper with one official that is in charge of customs. And he said, well, we've received dozens of empty trains coming from China to our countries, and they say, oh well, look how well it is working, but we see empty trains coming, so it's not really working. How does that? But what's behind it? And if you look at what's happening, is that there are municipal governments, Xi'an, the city of Shaanxi province, or in Chengdu, in Sichuan, and these cities are subsidizing it. They're giving monies to state-owned enterprises or private firms, and saying, look, we want to show that we support Belt and Road Initiative, so we give you money to run those trains, and then trains go, but they go empty because there's really not that much that they can carry. Of course, many of these trains are coming full or rather full, but that to explain these empty trains, which are it's the efforts of local governments that are trying to show that they are part of this and engaging in this way.
So thank you very much, Martin, for being willing to join us today as a speaker. And thank you everyone for taking part in today's webinar. We hope that you have enjoyed the very interesting topic that has been discussed today. And our next webinar, which will happen in 2 weeks, will be on the area of data and tech. So keep an eye on our social media for the full topic and who our next guest speaker will be. So thank you so much for your participation, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.